When people talk about early retirement, they talk about the money, they talk about the number, they talk about the math. But what almost no one talks about is what happens after you stop working. Look, I retired at 51, and it took me about 2.5 years to understand what that actually meant, not financially, but personally. So let's get into it. The first phase for me was really about re examining relationships. It surprised me after I retired because I didn't anticipate that being one of the first things that I started to take a look at. And folks, I started to look at all of my relationships, not just the work friendships, but the personal ones too. When work went away, I expected relationships to stay the same. Instead, I started to really see them more clearly. One of the things that retirement does for you is it provides capacity. That capacity gives you room in your mind to think. So you're not just thinking about the next thing you have to do, you're just thinking for the sake of thinking. And that brings an incredible amount of clarity. And one of those areas of clarity were around my friendships. Some friendships were built around shared schedules. Some of my friendships were just shared around history. There are people that I've known for 30, 40 years that I continue to be friends with because I've known them for 30, 40 years, even though we've grown in different directions. Some of my relationships were out of convenience. I could golf on Sunday, so I'm going to golf on Sunday with this group of people. I could golf on Tuesday, I'm going to golf with this group of people. And some were around survival. Particularly when I was raising children, what I found was I had a group of people around me that I became friends with because our kids went to school. We were dealing with some of the same stuff. We all had some of the same frustrations. And out of that sense of survival and having the village to help us raise each other's kids, it was great. But I'm not in that space anymore. Once my life slowed down, I had to accept something that was a little bit uncomfortable. Not all friendships are meant to last forever. That doesn't make them fake. It doesn't make them failures. And some people are just in your life for a season, and that season can end when you change. I have buddies of mine that I've known for 40 years, but today they're still doing the same stuff they were dealing with 40 years ago. I'll give you an example. I had one buddy of mine that I used to live with years ago, and we were pretty good friends, but he had hit some hard times. This is 30 years ago. He had hit some hard times, and times were tough. I was moving forward, and he was in a difficult spot. So what ended up occurring was I moved out and found another place to live. He continued to be there. I hadn't talked to him again for 30 years. So 30 years passes, another buddy of mine sees him somewhere. So then we rekindle the friendship. But what you realize in short order is some of the reasons that I walked away from that relationship 30 years ago are some of the things that hold true today. Doesn't mean that anybody's a bad person. It doesn't even mean that the person is doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But what they're doing is different than what I'm doing, and it just doesn't mesh. So we drifted and we don't talk anymore. And I'm okay with that because that season had come to an end. And my biggest frustration in dealing with people isn't the fact that relationships come and go. It's because I knew that certain relationships weren't good for me and they should have went a lot sooner than they did, but I didn't do it out of some feeling of nostalgia. In these cases, there's not these big arguments, there's no big conversations. You just drift. One day, you just realize that your cup isn't filled by this interaction and you drift away. A lot of people get upset about that. I think it's fine because not everybody is made to go with you to the next phase of your life. And accepting that, especially with personal friendships, was the first real emotional shift that retirement asked of me. After that, I moved into another phase and I didn't recognize it at that time that I was going through this phase. And some of these, they start to happen, but you don't know they're happening, but they're actually happening. Is that I stayed busy. I talk a lot on this channel about the Master Gardener program. I talk a lot about learning piano. I talk a lot about the YouTube channel. I talk about a lot of the things that I'm doing, playing golf. And I realized that I was staying busy. I was looking at my calendar, realizing I had more hard coded things on my calendar than I ever did when I was working. And I didn't understand how that came to pass. I realized that I was taking on new tasks, I was taking on a bunch of responsibilities, I was taking on projects that I didn't have to take. And I told myself I was doing all of these things, or I tell myself that I'm doing all these things out of interest. and opportunity. But what I didn't see was that I was really recreating structure. I don't even realize sometimes how much I actually need it. Work had always given me a sense of framework. My days were all framed out. I knew what I was going to do. It was a reason to get up. It gave me a rhythm. It gave me a sense of order. And when that disappeared, I replaced it automatically without questioning it. That's where it gets scary because you start to do it without knowing that you're doing it. And next thing you know, you have this thing that you've created that you didn't even think about you wanted. See how that works? I did it not because I needed the money, not because I was bored, but because the freedom itself felt suspicious. And a lot of people feel suspicious for not working. When I talk to people on these chats with Salvador, that's one of the things that a lot of guys particularly tell me is they feel suspicious or they don't feel right not going into work because your worth has always been about you being productive and you getting things done. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just understanding that it exists. My whole goal is to create things and put things in the ether for you to contemplate so you can go out and investigate those on your own to understand if these are things that are affecting you. They may not be, and that's fine. I'm good with that. But I think that what was happening with me is work had trained me to believe that time without obligation needed justification. And that's just not the case. Time without obligation needed justification. So what I essentially did was replace one structure with another. And I wasn't avoiding doing nothing. I was avoiding unstructured time. I just didn't know that's what I was doing yet. Now that I recognized it, guess what? My calendar is clear except for a meeting I have this morning, but my calendar is basically clear for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So maybe I'll get out and play some golf. And now I'm in a different phase. And this one isn't gradual. This one hits all at once. So the other day I was playing golf with a buddy of mine. I was walking, I wasn't rushed. I wasn't checking on time, which is interesting because usually I'm always thinking that at the end of a round, I got to do X, Y, and Z, but I wasn't checking on time. And then it hit me. I'm not required to be anywhere. There's no meeting that I'm missing. There's no deadline that's waiting. Nobody is expecting me. And I'll tell you, that realization was incredibly profound. Not exciting, not relieving, but grounding. For the first time, I'm not thinking about what comes next or what should be done instead. I'm just here. For the first time, I'm not thinking about what comes next or what I should be doing instead. I'm just here. This is the moment retirement stops being something I talk about and becomes something I actually live. Not as a plan, not as an idea, but as a reality. And I'll tell you what I think is interesting is that these phases weren't really about retirement. They were really about unlearning, unlearning obligation as my identity, unlearning busyness as worth, unlearning usefulness as presence. I made a joke the other day when I was playing golf and I was making a comment about something. And I said out loud, and I shouldn't have said this because it sounded horrible. But I said, this is really important. But everything I say is really important. And I believe that everything I say is really important. But it doesn't have to be said that everything that I'm saying is important because it's not up to me to make it important. It's about it being important. But it's because in my mind, I am so useful with having to provide value that I had to demonstrate and verbally state that what I'm going to say is adding value, which I shouldn't have said in the first place. So those people who are watching the channel, I apologize for that because I'm really not that much of a knucklehead. But I'll tell you that retirement isn't changing me all at once. It's peeling things back layer by layer. And folks, this channel is really helping me because what it's forcing me to do is it's forcing me to talk to you about my experience, which then helps me bring my experience to the forefront and think about it a little bit different. So this channel is really helping all of us in the community. And it's my hope that we're all learning and growing together. So I just want to close with this. I'm not sharing this as advice. I'm just sharing something that I didn't expect to learn. I just didn't expect to learn these things. These things that I'm sharing with you on the channel. I thought retirement was going to be tiptoeing through the tulips, not doing anything except in living footloose and fancy free, but it's so much more than that. And I didn't expect to learn that because I learned that it's not just about leaving work. It's really about arriving at your own life. So I'm going to say that one more time. Because retirement isn't about leaving work, it's about arriving in your own life. So I'm going to stop here, let that sink in, but understand that it's never my expectation that everybody retire early. I'm going to stop it here, but I want you to understand that it's never my expectation that everybody retire early, but it is my expectation that you live your best life. So on that note, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.